Welcome back, friends. The Behind the Badge podcast here at the Monroe County Sheriff's Office in Rochester, New York. My name is Todd Baxter. I'm the Sheriff of Monroe County. Here with one of our lead detectives of the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, CJ Zimmerman.
Hey,
Detective,
Sheriff.
welcome back to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. And your sister, we're just getting to know her a bit more, but the book we're going to talk about today, what an incredible story, what an incredible journey, what an incredible, brave person you are to share it and help other people in their journeys. Linda, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and this is your baby brother, huh?
It's my baby brother, yep.
We're going to have some conversations about that. Maybe not on this podcast, maybe have a third podcast, but people are dying to know more about that young man right there and figure him out. But really, this book, Braving Therapy, and your story, your journey, is such a big story. We're going to try and do this in two parts. This is way bigger than a podcast, but we deal with survivors all the time, and I don't know if we know exactly what we're doing in the survivor world. We're just trying to do the right things. One of the things when I reviewed your book, I just want to bring that out forefront here, is it was just an incredible, almost like taglines, like as we're talking out there, you nailed me. You're like, that's me. She's describing me as you're going through your experience of post-traumatic stress disorder, and CJ, learning to be a better detective by your experiences and do the right things by people that are being traumatized. And so with that being said, I just want to introduce the people. This is going to be a double part podcast. It's going to be a longer story than just one pod, and probably going to be about 3 or 4 podcasts. But real quick, CJ, just a quick review of who you are, and then Linda will have you introduce yourself, or maybe CJ can introduce his sister.
Yeah.
This is cool.
My name is CJ Zimmerman. I'm a sergeant with the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. I've been with the Sheriff's Office for this October. It'll be 35 years. I worked in the jail bureau for 8 years, and then I transferred over to the road patrol. I was an investigator for 5 years, and I've been doing the sergeant thing for the last 8 years now.
And as your position as sergeant, you're coordinating the investigators and investigations in your area of operation, and you're always leading some kind of detail or some kind of innovative way to do police work. I mean, you're always on the cutting edge here.
Yeah, it's nice. I supervise 3 investigators and a victim advocate, Paula Penna, who is absolutely awesome.
Incredible.
And a lot of the work that I do is administrative work and just help the deputies of the zone.
Yeah. Well, your experience and your leadership and your guidance is essential. I think in this story it's going to play out a little bit as we talk a little bit further, but I wanted to reintroduce you.
Thank you. And just from a personal standpoint, we were born and raised in Medina, New York, and I'm the youngest of 8 kids.
Wow.
And this is my sister, Flora Linda Zimmerman Feig Knipe.
I'm like one of those people who has lots of aliases.
Yeah, lots of aliases.
Every combination of 3 names.
There you go.
But I'll turn it over to Linda, but she is my oldest sister. She's also my godmother.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I'm not really good in that area, but,
that's why we're here. This is actually an intervention for you, CJ, in there. But,
So,
Linda, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Again, we're going to talk about your book, Braving Therapy. We're going to talk about you and your experiences, but how you're really, helping other people, right? This is such a powerful story that you're willing to share it with people, and I think that's incredibly brave, and I think no one else can talk the talk. You got the experience, and unfortunately, you can either bury it, like I talked about. I've been burying it for years and years, my post-traumatic stress, and as you describe in the book. But so thank you for coming. Thank you for your story. How about just a little bit about who you are? And I can't wait to get into this story.
Oh, thanks. Well, the first probably almost 20 years of my professional life, I worked in human services. I was a Red Cross director, executive director locally, and I decided when I was close to 40 that what I really wanted to do was work a couple of things. I wanted to work with people, helping them choose better career paths, because I kept working with people in, especially the Red Cross, who just were making poor decisions. Mm-hmm. So I went back to college for a degree in counselor education to be a high school counselor. CJ was one of my first career counseling.
Really?
CJ was in college.
First semester at Oswego.
doing terribly because he was in a business program that he hated.
Oh, that's you. That's you all day long.
A 1.4 academic probation, and
we were sitting on the back steps of the house talking when he came home, and he was just telling me, you know, what he was planning on doing, and I said, "What do you want to do?" And he was like, he wouldn't tell me. He said, "You'll laugh."
Oh.
And I said, I won't laugh. And he said, and finally, I mean, this took a long time for you to say this. He said, "I have always wanted to be a cop. I get so excited when I think about it." And then it was like I had to keep from smiling because it was like, well, of course.
Of course, yeah.
Of course.
And-
and that he had been so afraid to say it.
Wow.
And yeah, so you went back and switched your program, and I was like, I need to be a counselor.
That was it. Huh? That's
Yeah,
awesome.
Exactly, and then my grades shot right up.
Yeah.
So and
To
it
the
was
point
all-
where they had you come in and talk with other freshmen.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was profound. I mean, like, you knew it.
Yeah.
He knew it, just didn't want to say it, and
Yeah.
you know, bring
yeah.
that out in young people. I mean,
Well, and we have cousins who are cops.
Yeah.
So it wasn't.
I find that hard to believe in your family name, right? That's awesome. They're all over Monroe County. Good people, good cops too.
Yeah.
So, Linda, your journey here is about this book, right? And
Yeah.
you know, growing up in Oswego, or no, you guys went to school in Medina, right? I
Right.
didn't know that. I didn't know
Right.
Orleans County, right?
Born
Was
and
that Medina?
raised Medina, Orleans
Yeah.
County,
How didn't I know that about you?
and family's been there for.
200 years.
Wow.
More than 200 years, yeah.
Great history.
We were raised in the house that my great grandparents built in
Really?
1908. Yeah.
No, I'm assuming farmers or
Nope.
no,
furniture
fruit? No.
builders.
Really?
S.C. Parker
Okay.
Furniture.
Wow,
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah. So I started in my graduate program, and at the very end of the first course that I was in, and it was a course on different counseling therapies, I asked a question, and this starts really the first chapter of the book. Is there ever a time when you go to therapy that you feel worse instead of better? And the professor gets really quiet, and he goes, well, in the case where you have a rape in your background and you finally go to therapy, therapy is going to be worse before it gets better. And I was like,
Wow.
and we were sitting in a circle of about a dozen students, and I was the oldest of the group. And I was just like, don't blink, don't blink, don't blink. And I couldn't wait to get out of there.
Yeah.
And that triggered the PTSD symptoms that I had gone for 18 years since that incident. And it just flooded me. I wasn't able to eat or sleep, or I had re-experiencing. It was just, I felt like I was going crazy.
Yeah, when I read that in the book, that was so profound. That the fact that it took my experience with veterans and post-traumatic stress. That's really where I most experience with. You know, that burying of it, that compartmentalizing, that putting it, you know, in that filing cabinet, and the clutter mess that you're going to talk about in a few minutes that you described so well in my brain. I mean, it's so. I get dumbfounded that we call it post-traumatic stress disorder still to this day, even though it's by the DSM it's a disorder. I got that, but you know, post-traumatic stress is something we should be very cognizant and aware of. It's going to occur in every human being. Take traumatic incidents like yours are incredibly traumatic, or just experience of police officers doing 20 years of their career. It's going to build up.
Right. Well, I've been reading a lot about trauma and then PTSD, and trauma that people can have traumatic experiences, and they can get through them, and they may never develop PTSD, but also, you can have a traumatic experience that wouldn't turn into PTSD if you dealt with it.
Right.
But when you just keep plugging along, you shove it down, and then you start doing all sorts of things to just avoid the topic, avoid everything about it. That probably a good 25% of people who've had traumatic experiences will end up having PTSD.
Yeah, as you put in the book, this is my existence, skipping past things that are uncomfortable, shoving them in a cluttered closet, right? And what cop doesn't do that, let alone what person, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And
Thanks for sharing that. I read it and I was like, nailed it.
Yeah, and
Nailed it.
You talk about PTSD, and then I think with law enforcement, there's the cumulative PTSD. Um, you can either have the real traumatic events, which I've never experienced, but then you have all those little events, and I don't, I I think just talking about them and getting them out, because over time they can build up, and then you develop bad habits, bad marriages, drinking problems, and all those other issues that can develop.
Well,
So,
because the constant that you're talking about is what, as a school counselor, I would deal with kids who grew up in those traumatic households where they never knew what was going to happen to them. And for me, and we'll talk about the rape incidents in a bit, but for me, I was afraid that it was going to end in my death. And that was as bad as it got. But and I buried that, and didn't come out until I was into therapy 6 months, and it was such a surprise when I realized that I had been holding that inside of me, that feeling like I was going to die. This could be the moment of my death. And I would think that with police officers, you have that feeling a lot of times when you go into situations. So that constant kind of trauma is this going to be it for me?
Right.
It's interesting. The effects that I see from the job would be negative, bitter, angry, sour, cynical. Not so much a loss of empathy or compassion, but it kind of gets all out of whack. And sometimes you'll have somebody that you feel massive amounts of empathy for.
Right.
And then other times, depending on the day, you can go to a job and you're just thinking about, okay, what's the next thing I need to do? What's the next? I need to do 50 tasks here. And you're so focused on the tasks that the empathy kind of gets lost. And I think that's one thing of, you always hear it. How would you want your mother to be treated? How would you want your mother to be? And as long as you always keep that guiding factor in sight, that helps. But I've definitely seen the effects of the job on new police officers and how quickly they change.
Sure.
Yeah, and there's a really strong need to control. Like, you need to control everything in your environment.
And is that the book talking? You compartmentalize this stuff, right? You put it in the back, or
right? You do, but you need to control. You need to control everything, because in that there are those times when you're out of control. And for me, the very worst one was being raped, and so after that, you just feel like, for your own safety, you need to have control of everything, which I think is what you're talking about
please.
too. And you get angry, or I'm just thinking as you're talking about that, I had really high expectations of other people. Like, I have high expectations of myself, but I expected high things of everybody around me, and I found that really kind of annoying assessment that I had of other people went away after therapy. So I think that was probably related to the PTSD too. It's just, I expected people to behave a certain way, and
and it manifests in so many different ways. I know police officers, you could stereotype about the drinking, right? The fraternization and all that other stuff, but everybody deals with it a different way. We had just one more veteran story. We had a veteran walk in the Veterans Outreach Center, 92 years old, never displayed a symptom of shell shock back in the day until he was 92 and started having those nightmares and waking up in sweats, right? It compartmentalized it for 50 years, almost in this guy's life. And then it pops out with that was the onset of dementia. It was pulling it out of him. It was like, it's in there, man. It's in there. Just let it go, right? And it's perfectly, it's not normal. It's not, I shouldn't say normal, but post-traumatic stress disorder, just deal with it, man. It's there. It's amazing. But I want to get into this book. I want to share your story, and I'm I'm really hesitant to share your story, so help me out with this. It's not a comfortable conversation for me to have.
I told you it was
but-
going to make them nervous.
Yeah, it does. I've been shot at before and everything. This is making me really nervous. But the book, Braving Therapy, and I just, your main themes, the pain, the journey, and the promise. I think those themes nailed it too, of our experience in life of dealing with this problem. So thank you for the fact that you're willing to share this. But I think those themes are great that I just want to pull out.
Yeah, and I want to, there are certain topics that people are uncomfortable with, especially anything that has to do with sex for some,
Right, yeah.
which gets us into trouble after being a counselor trying to talk to kids,
Right.
doing stupid things. But, oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought.
So can I just cut right to the chase, and maybe CJ,
Yeah.
you can help me out here. I mean, you had 2 incredibly traumatic incidents in rape.
Right, and that's what I was going to say about being uncomfortable.
yeah.
The thing about this book, and the
Right.
thing that I'm finding people are resonating with, is we all have hard experiences in life.
Right.
But that is, I believe that that's the goal of this great adventure, is that you have hard stuff happening to you, and then you grow from it.
Right.
I grew more during this therapy journey than anything else in my life. It was the hardest thing I did.
Right.
So when people will say to me, I'm so sorry this happened to you, and be uncomfortable talking about it, but it's like, you've had really hard things too. This was just mine.
Right.
Yeah,
and again, profound statements in this book. It's like talking to someone about death, right? You're going through a line at a wake, and you just don't know what to say when you get up to the grieving family. There's just no words. And same thing here. How do you talk to people that are survivors? And it's difficult conversations.
Yeah.
It's almost cliche out now there, but
So take it away, Linda.
yeah. Linda, if you don't mind, share the pain with us, so we can.
Okay. So you have listed 2 rapes here, and there was when I was in college and I was young and not too bright like a lot of young people are. I got myself in a situation where I was alone with a guy and ended up in a date rape situation. I swore to myself I would never talk about it. I would never think about it. I felt like I was stupid for getting myself in that situation, and I never identified it as rape.
Wow.
Not at all. And then when I was in my mid-20s and I was living alone in Florida, I was working for a company, and my apartment was broken into, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and there was a guy standing next to my bed, and he raped me. And I had, immediately I had all these things going through my head. There had been another woman that I worked with in my office. She was about my age. She was somebody I didn't know that well yet, but I wanted to get to know because we seemed a lot alike. And I heard that she had been raped. She lived in my neighborhood, and so I was sure that this was the same guy, and I knew she had been hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So I had all of this stuff going on in my head. And so I just started talking with him and just trying to pretend that this wasn't happening, and I was just going to talk my way through it. And so that's what I did.
In your second attack, I mean, so you wake up in the middle, there's someone standing above your bed, and you go through survival mode in the book. You talk about what you did to survive at that moment, right? And
Right.
then you critique it later in your head,
Right.
Monday morning quarterback, should I have fought back or should I have done something?
Yes.
But, just to articulate, you have no idea what you're going to do at that moment of truth, right? You're going to rely on instinct to survive.
Right, right. But the Monday morning quarterbacking
Right.
is the worst thing that everybody does when they're not talking.
Yeah.
They're ruminating on how stupid they were and how they should have done something differently, and they're not getting any other perspective but their own, and they just keep beating themselves up. And a lot of people do that, and when I talk about that voice in your head, that negative self-talk, I find really accomplished people do that a lot.
Yeah.
And I'll see people in the audience
Nod, yeah.
from when I'm talking, and they're nodding, going, yeah, I do that. And it's people that have it all together, but in their heads, they're critiquing themselves and they're ruminating on all the things they feel like they did wrong or the things that they're embarrassed about, and just beating themselves up. And so, yeah, that's what I was doing. I started doing that right away. Like, I should have done something differently.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, an interesting thing about that is we are always our own worst critics. And the things that we say to ourselves, we would never, ever say to another person. You know, but I mean, just beating yourself up after a hot call on the job, you're like, oh, I should have taken this perimeter point. I shouldn't have gotten on the air and talked so much. Or I should have given out this information. And each person can sit there and just critique it for hours or days or weeks,
or
years.
Yeah, like Linda did, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It's there, and it's such, again, almost we are our own worst critique, right? And I think that's part of our survival mode. That, you know, if this happens again, would I be able to prevent it, right? Because if I can critique it and, you know, could you prevent it? I think that's, at least in my mind, I'm going through, like, I won't get in that position again.
Right, but it's also a control. It's also a
you keep on
control
saying that
thing.
word
How can I
control. I like
control?
that, yeah.
How can I control this the next time so that it doesn't happen? And I will keep saying this because the therapy for it, for anybody, whether it's going to therapy or just talking, is to talk about it, because that's where you get the real feedback, and that's where you can make wiser decisions about how you really should do it the next time and what you really do or don't have control over.
Right.
Because I think I found for myself, and this went on for years, that caused a lot of depression, was that I would beat myself up. I'd be ashamed. I would think that I should have controlled things better. And when I finally started talking about things and getting feedback, it was like, well, you didn't do anything wrong, and you would have, you know, the way that you acted in that moment was exactly how you should have acted, and this stuff just happens.
Yeah, and we look at that, and your journey and our journey is like heroic, right? So when I read your story of what you did during that attack, it was incredibly heroic. I mean, you had to keep a peace of mind. You had to survive, and you were thinking things through in a process that, if I do this is going to be the outcome, so I won't do it. I mean, in the middle of being raped, right? In the middle of being shot at, sometimes with police officers, people are thinking that. You're thinking, and that's, we call it heroic. We call it, like, it's utterly incredible. That people will do that, but then that's going to be scar tissue the rest of your life, right? That's going to be, you're going to critique the hell out of those decisions, even though they were perfectly right and logical, right, at the moment to survive.
Yeah, I think I mean, I'm good at talking with people and listening, and one of the things that I didn't want is I didn't want him to kiss me, so I got to keep him talking.
Yeah, great.
You know,
oh my God.
So that was part of the like, just keep him talking because I don't want him to kiss me. And yeah.
And this kind of dovetails into the next segment, which I really connected with in the book, was when he called you.
Yeah.
Well, apparently I did a really good job talking because he wanted to call me up and talk to me.
Incredible. So let's set the table there. First of all, CJ, you never heard this story until the book? I mean,
I never heard this story until she was writing the book.
God bless. Wow.
Yeah, and you have to understand, I was
12.
I was 12 years old at the time. I was at the cottage, and I remember there was a buzz because being in a big family in such a small building.
Right.
And I remember somebody came in and said, hey, just so you know, somebody broke into your sister's apartment down in Florida. She's safe, and there's going to be a trial, so you'll hear the family talking, but everything's good.
Right.
So that's all I was told at that time. And then when Linda moved back to Medina about 6, 7, 8 years later, I remember I asked her, hey, you remember that guy that broke into your apartment? What was the deal with that?
Wow.
And then she just said he raped me. And I was like, well, okay.
Incredible.
So we were
Yeah,
painting the bathroom.
that usually stops people.
Yeah. Right, as we talked about
That was
earlier.
the one time she shoved
I
me
gotta
out.
go. I gotta go.
I'm out of here.
So Linda, share that. I mean, so this guy breaks in your apartment, he rapes you. You're going through all those emotions, and then you get a phone call.
So
That's
so
incredible.
the conversation was, he asked my name, and I told him because I was afraid.
During the rape, he asked your name.
Yes,
right,
I
yeah.
told him because I was afraid maybe he already knew it. And I thought about lying, and I was like, I told him my first name. He asked what my last name was, and I was going to lie. And then I thought, oh, shoot, if he already knows who I am. So I told him. And then I asked him if he'd done this before because I thought it was my colleague's rapist.
Gotcha.
And he said, no, I didn't believe him. And so it was a little bit back and forth like that. But he asked me if I was going to call the police, and I told him I would not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was very nervous. I called my employers afterwards, and they came over. We called the hospital. They took me to the hospital, and the police were called. But even that morning when we came back, and it was like 4 or 5 hours later, I was really nervous about police cars being at
Right.
my place because I told them I wouldn't call. And then I went and stayed with my boss at their house a couple of days and came back home. And the night I came back home, he called me up and said, "Where have you been?" Now this is before cell phones and everything. It wasn't identified who was calling, and it was just a landline. He called me up and said, "Where have you been?"
Wow. And you knew the voice.
I knew the voice right away.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a couple things to mention is because I've had some younger people who have read the book. They were like, well, how did he know her phone number?
Right.
And I had to explain, well, at that time you
Back
could
in the
call
day,
them,
yeah. Put phone book.
give an address
and
and you
yeah,
get the
first
phone
name, you got
number,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Today it's called Google.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But this is where I found it fascinating.
Yeah.
And it's, just a couple things, he calls, she hears, where have you been? And then immediately she goes into calm down, just keep him talking.
Amazing.
And this is where it's like she's an investigator. And I'll just read a couple things. It was my opportunity to find out about him. There was clanging coming over the phone. Are you a mechanic? It sounds like you're at a mechanic shop. It's kind of late, Dad, isn't it? I was saying whatever I could until my thinking cleared. And then he gives her little pieces of information. I work second shift at a factory, so you can make calls during work. That's cool. She's building rapport with this guy. And then after some of this, she asks him, what's your name? I'm Derek.
Yeah.
And then after that, she shifts. Now she's kind of built this relationship with him. And now she's like, the police are never going to be able to use this. They're not going to be able to use anything to prove. So I need to find out where he is. And then she starts asking him direct questions about the crime. And, you scared me the other night when you came into my apartment while I was sleeping. You need to knock before you come into somebody's house. And
that's incredible that you can have that composure to get evidence, right? I mean, you're really doing detective work,
Well,
like CJ was saying.
It was
incredible composure.
a bit of time before I calmed down enough to be able to think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of my skills is connecting with people. So I knew how to
used
keep the
that.
conversation going,
Right.
but yeah, I had to really clear my thinking before I could figure out what I needed to do.
Yeah, and he gives nuggets of information that are just going to play perfect in a prosecutor relationship, right? I wrap packages so you can find out, he's in some kind of shop that wraps packages.
They knew exactly the line to go to.
Really?
Yeah.
The shift that he was working, you got all that.
The detective was shocked when I called him up.
And then he has the goals, gives you advice to make sure you don't leave keys in the door in the future, right?
Yeah.
And that's just powerful evidence in our world. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And make sure you lock your windows; those are easy to get through. And people read the book. You can't I can't believe this lady did this. I got seasoned cops that couldn't do what she did in this situation. It's almost impossible what you did to maybe hopefully put some closure. We're going to talk about that in segment 2, how long it took to get some closure in this thing. But at least got some justice, I guess, in a rudimentary way that we can get a rapist off the streets and maybe pull some criminal justice into this. But long term, justice for you is I think what the journey and then the promise is probably the best justice you're going to get people to live your life whole after this.
And I think, and honestly, I'm doing podcasts, but it's not about the legal or law enforcement part. But it was, the whole journey was a real learning experience, and I just felt like I wasn't totally done with it until I passed along the learning.
Yeah, right.
So,
And
yeah.
this is where it's so powerful. This is where this book, I think everybody should read it. I think any human being should read the book because, as we said, we're all experiencing one level or another. You know, if you're about involved in a car accident, you know, a loved one passed away in a car accident, that's traumatic, right? But if you were a school counselor for years and years and working with kids that are going through hell and trauma in their whole life, and you're trying to coach them through, you're absorbing that vicarious trauma, right? I mean, it's all building constantly.
Yeah,
and
and
for
I
you to
probably is probably the same as what police officers have to do, and I tried to explain it to one of our nieces who's a PA in psychiatric, is when you're working, it's like you keep all of your energy on the other side of your hand. You give them what they need, but you don't let their difficult energy come back into you and re-traumatize you. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, I said this can be a long, you know, we could probably do 3 or 4 podcasts, and we haven't even scratched the surface, but I just wanted to plant the seed in phase 1 here of, you know, what we're all dealing with, human beings, and then your incredible story. And in the next episode, we literally like to show, you know, what you're now doing with this powerful, powerful story you have that can save other people's lives, can change them for the better, definitely. But there's no doubt in our world, when you're talking like this, you're saving lives. And we see it all the time too much in law enforcement. Law enforcement is living terrible lives because they can't deal with this. And I think your story is an incredible way to pull that out of people and say, you know what, if she can do it, she can do it. You know, maybe my story is not as, you know, as difficult as hers. And you're here on a microphone sharing it. That's, again, I'm still shy about talking about these things. God bless you. Thank you for doing this. We really appreciate it. It means a lot.
It really is my pleasure.
Good. So we're going to take a break. We're going to come back to phase 2 of this, episode number 2, and we'll go a deeper dive into this book, Braving Therapy, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.